Hey, good afternoon to you. 3:06 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news coming up this hour. Mollie Hemingway is here. She's the best. She's with the Federalist. She's a Fox News contributor. We're going to talk to her about the Biden campaign, the flailing Biden campaign, and its latest efforts to try and win over American voters. What a disaster. That's coming up with Mollie at 3:30. 4 o'clock, James Lynch is here from National Review. We'll take a closer look at the Biden family as Joe Biden makes a dark of night visit to Hunter Biden's ex-girlfriend, Haley Biden. A very bizarre thing, just ahead of Hunter's gun trial. And then Chris Bedford is here at 5 o'clock from The Blaze. We talked to him about Speaker Mike Johnson and everything else going on in the country. We'll talk to you at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. It's great to have you with us, as always. Hope you had a very nice Memorial Day weekend. Or as we were saying yesterday, a grateful Memorial Day. Good also to have back with me today Corey Inganamort, the producer of this fine program. Corey is going to be flying co-pilot today with me on the air because I don't know if you can tell immediately, but I'm feeling a bit under the weather today, and Corey has graciously agreed to help populate the air with the words necessary to produce a radio show. Hello, Corey.
Hello, Vince. Happy to be a co-captain with you today. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're doing it. It's a big deal, and you and I, of course, always have endless conversations about everything going on in the news. We'll do it today on the air together as we watch Robert DiNero is the secret weapon of the Biden campaign. Robert DiNero, I just looked to check. He's 80 years old, a year younger than 81-year-old Joe Biden. 81-year-old Joe Biden is failing as a presidential candidate. It's a disaster, a huge Politico story today about how Democrats are fearing that they've gotten into crisis mode about what are the chances here for this election to even result. This is the headline, Democrats in full-blown freak out over Biden. Dems are spazzing out right now about Biden's immense weakness as a candidate. So the guy who's going to save them is apparently Robert freaking DiNero. DiNero just voiced an ad for these guys, voiced a Biden campaign ad. And today, this morning, outside of the first day of closing arguments in that ridiculous Alvin Bragg trial, Robert DiNero showed up in the 10 o'clock hour this morning to the camera bay outside to talk. And did you see that when he got there, Corey, he was wearing his COVID mask?
Yeah, as if the optics weren't going to be bad enough. Robert DiNero, of all people, it actually makes sense if you take a step back and look at it. Joe Biden is an angry, bitter, depreciating old 80-year-old. Who else would he call on but another 80-year-old depreciating, bitter old man, Robert DiNero? They put out a press release early this morning teasing this big event today in Manhattan at 10:15 a.m., Biden-Harris campaign to hold press conference with special guests. And then, of course, there was a typo in the very next line, this big announcement. Today, Tuesday, May 27th. Today is actually Tuesday, May 28th. At 10:15, Biden-Harris campaign will hold a press conference with special guests outside the Manhattan criminal courthouse. We had no idea. We had no idea that special guest would be Robert DiNero. He provided us with some great audio at this point.
Well, he got there and he's wearing this COVID mask because at first you're watching as a group of men are walking downhill towards the microphones. And we were all wondering because the Biden campaign didn't bother telling us who was actually going to be there. They just said special guests, as you pointed out. And so they're walking towards the microphones and there's a dude wearing a COVID mask. And I was like, well, who is this mentally ill person that they brought with them? This is kind of sad. And sure enough, he takes his mask off, and it's Robert DiNero.
Well, they're stuck in 2020. They are stuck in 2020.
He's wearing a mask outdoors. I believe it was 83 degrees this morning in New York. And he's in New York City, and a mask on. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the amount of mental illness necessary to still be wearing a mask outside in 2024? Well, Robert DiNero has it, whatever particular neurotic mess you need to be. It's Robert DiNero. And today, he had all sorts of things to say. Let me play some of this Robert DiNero audio. I was laughing and I was sad actually to see it. I was like, this is pathetic. You see Robert DiNero movies and you think it's cool, but then you act and pretend to be a tough guy in real life and you're like, oh, this is actually kind of sad. Here's Robert De Niro today saying Trump's going to destroy the world.
I feel at home in these streets. I feel comfortable. The Twin Towers fell just over here, just over there. This part of the city was like a ghost town. But we vowed we would not allow terrorists to change our way of life. And we started the Tribeca Festival to bring people back. I love this city. I love this city. I don't want to destroy it. Donald Trump wants to destroy not only the city, but the country, and eventually he could destroy the world.
He wants to destroy New York City, the country, and the entire world, he says cartoonishly. Now, that was not the message of Trump's rally in the Bronx this past week. Trump's message was, I want to make New York great again. So what's the disconnect?
Yeah, well, Joe Biden is out there telling everybody, especially minority voters, that they're the victims. Like you said, Donald Trump held a rally in the Bronx. 25,000 people showed up. They're saying, no, you're not a victim. Let's make this city great again. Robert De Niro apparently thinks that New York City is doing fine. I don't think that is the mentality of most New Yorkers right now. You ride the metro, you can't feel safe. Later, he says that New York has a brand. The subway in New York, you don't feel safe. He said New York has a brand, according to Eric Adams. It does have a brand. It's a brand of crime and poverty. Just look at a couple months ago when you had illegal aliens attacking New York police officers and then being released the next day on bail. New York is struggling right now. Robert De Niro apparently thinks that this status quo, or the trend that we're heading on, is a good way that New York should be running. I don't think so. Neither does Donald Trump. So if he's representing the Joe Biden campaign, which he is today, that message needs to get out there that Joe Biden, along with Robert De Niro, thinks that New York City is doing just fine. Just fine. Leave it alone.
He's unbelievable. And you have to remember that the district attorney for Manhattan is right now occupying all of his time with trying to destroy Biden's political opponent rather than prosecuting all of the many crimes taking place in that city. And a lot of these, these Democrat prosecutors, that's what they're doing. They're on political missions, not on actually trying to clean up the crime you just mentioned, which is dogging New York and so many Democrat-run cities across the country. Here you have Robert De Niro today talking about why he joined the Biden campaign.
And that's why I've joined the Biden-Harris campaign, because the only way to preserve our freedoms and hold on to our humanity is to vote for Joe Biden for president. Really. We don't have a choice.
The car alarm was a nice touch in that audio. I like that a lot.
Props to that protester. Yeah, that was a theme throughout Robert De Niro's speech, or whatever you want to call it today. Some brave American said, I had enough. You don't have to hear this guy. Let's play this car alarm. That was a nice touch. And boy, what an uplifting message that the Biden campaign has. We need to vote not for Joe Biden, but against Donald Trump to preserve humanity. So humanity will end if Donald Trump is elected president. What an uplifting message. Does that drive you to the polls?
It's amazing. In fact, the Biden team, they were asked, one of their guys was asked, because they made January 6th a big feature of today's press conference too. And they brought a couple of the CNN cops with them. It was the guy's name, Michael Fanone.
Yeah.
So they brought these CNN cops from January 6th with them. And they're standing up there. And one of the reporters asked the Biden campaign, hey, Republicans keep saying that you're running on January 6th because Biden doesn't have a record to run on. And what do you say to that? And he's like, well, that's not true. We have a great record to run on. That's why you're bringing Robert De Niro out to say emotionally incontinent stuff like this.
Under Trump, this kind of government will perish from the earth. I don't mean to scare you. No, wait, maybe I do mean to scare you. If Trump returns to the White House, you can kiss these freedoms goodbye that we all take for granted. And elections, forget about it. That's over. That's done. If he gets in, I can tell you right now, he will never leave. He will never leave. You know that. He will never leave.
Government itself will perish from the earth if Trump gets back into office. He will never leave. I did go to the game tape and I saw De Niro said the same thing before Trump left office.
His argument would make a whole lot more sense if Trump wasn't already president for 4 years and then left on January 20th, 2021. Yeah. So this whole scare tactic, so he'll be the last president ever elected. It's all just, again, scare tactics, makes no sense whatsoever. Donald Trump was president. He was defeated by a questionable election, and he left office. We know that he's not president right now because inflation hit 9%. We know that he's not president because crime is through the roof. The world is unrest. No, Robert De Niro, Donald Trump will leave office after his next 4 years of serving in 2025.
Yeah, and
I'm sorry, 2020. Let me do the math. 2029.
Yeah. So you have here, Robert De Niro steps up and says all this, and he said it before. He said ahead of the 2020 election, he said that Donald Trump wants to stay president forever. He said that Donald Trump is going to start a war in order to ensure that he gets reelected, which he didn't do. He also said that he wanted to punch Trump in the face on multiple occasions, including while he was president of the United States. And that's all fine. That's totally forgiven. He's not the insurrectionist. The guy who wants to punch the duly elected president of the United States in the face, not the insurrectionist. But meanwhile, Donald Trump is the bad guy for campaigning for president and appealing to the voters so that they might grant him the privilege to do that again. So that's who the Biden campaign sends out. And so what we've had so far, and we'll get into this in more detail with Mollie Hemingway coming up at 3:30, but what we've had so far is clearly a left-wing orchestrated abuse of our justice system, where Donald Trump has been pulled away from the campaign trail, been dropped in court in Manhattan, has spent the last, 5-6 weeks there, and in an ongoing trial. Today, closing arguments. The defense, that is Trump's attorneys making the argument today during their brief closing argument that, the jury needs to think really carefully about this. I mean, there's no evidence of a crime whatsoever. And if you're looking for reasonable doubt, there are mountains. There's mountains of it. And you should be really careful before you send this man to prison in a situation where we don't have a crime. And the judge was, after the jury left the room, Judge Merchan was upset about this today. How could you say that? You don't mention prison. Don't mention the sentence. I handled the sentence. And so when the jury came back in today for the prosecution to make its closing arguments, which are expected to stretch on for hours because the prosecutors do not have a good case here. And they say that if you don't have a good case, you argue for a long time until you feel like you've felt your way through the dark to a good case. But he instantly warned the jury, hey, he told them, disregard everything that Trump's attorney said about prison. It's irrelevant. You're not supposed to think about that as you process all of this. But this is what's been happening. And so you have this jury going on, this trial going on, designed to take Trump down. It's only helped him, of course, blowing up in the left's face. The Biden campaign has tried to keep its fingerprints off of this, despite the fact that they have a Department of Justice attorney who's now working on Alvin Bragg's case. Trump's not allowed to mention that. But then today, they decide to come flying in with a press conference outside of the trial where they feature Robert De Niro, who's like spitting into the air with his anger and out of control behavior. This is insanity. You see that, Corey, and I know you got to try and disconnect yourself from the politics of all of this. Just an objective measure, that seems insane to me. They're only going to help Trump. It's almost like Trump himself orchestrated this whole thing.
Absolutely. And you see the media stressing about that. We saw Andrea Mitchell on MSNBC worried that the attention Trump is getting from the trials are only helping him. She's very worried about it. It's a 2016 all over again. We remember so much unearned airtime that Joe Scarborough used to give Donald Trump. It's backfiring because it is the biggest news story in the country right now. They're trying to jail Joe Biden's political opponent. Yeah. Michael Tyler basically said that today, that he is here because you all are here. The media is here. So they're realizing Donald Trump is getting way too much attention. So they want to get part of the action. They want to be part of the fanfare. So here's Michael Tyler earlier today, right outside the courthouse.
We're not here today because of what's going on over there. We're here today because you all are here. And so we are glad that you're all here this morning.
He even said it. They're jealous of the airtime that Donald Trump is getting. So they brought the Biden campaign outside the New York City courthouse. This is going to backfire because now all media attention, even the MSNBCs, the CNNs of the world who don't want to cover the Donald Trump trial, well, now the Biden campaign is there. I'm sorry, the Donald Trump campaign. Now they have to cover this because Joe Biden's campaign is there too. We'll see how this plays out, but it's not looking good for Biden.
No.
So the Biden folks have finally done it. After months of saying that politics had nothing to do with this trial, they showed up and made a campaign event out of a Lower Manhattan trial day for President Trump. In fact, Biden's cronies had a printed out campaign sign saying Biden-Harris. So why the change? Why is Joe Biden now making this a campaign event after months of weaponizing the legal system against President Trump? Because Joe Biden's numbers are in the tank. The headline for today in Politico very simply said, Dems in freak out over Joe Biden. Joe Biden is losing nationally. He's losing in every single battleground state. And President Trump's numbers continue to rise. And the best that Biden can do is roll out a washed-up actor. And don't worry, my remarks will be shorter than the Irishman. I won't make you suffer for 3 hours. But the best they can do is roll out a washed-up actor.
Yeah, Jason Miller with the Trump campaign today. Let me see. I've got Mark calling in from Frederick, Maryland, line 2. Mark, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. What I wanted to say is the fact that the Biden administration is rolling out somebody like Robert DiNero and whatever other celebrities they're going to roll out attached to their campaign just shows me how out of touch they are with the real American people. These celebrities have no idea and know what real Americans are going through on the ground day to day. They don't have to worry about putting food on the table now. They don't have to worry about paying rent. They don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And so it just shows me how in trouble that administration is and that they're going to lose in November.
Yeah, Mark, thank you. Yeah, it's like so decadent and so it is out of touch, isn't it? To think, if you're the Biden campaign, to think, you know what's going to save us? Bringing out Robert De Niro. The kids go crazy for Robert De Niro. You know, and if there's ever been a time in American history where a celebrity, quote unquote, where a celebrity's sway means less to the public, it's now. I mean, it's crazy what they're doing. We'll talk about it with Mollie Hemingway. She's just moments away. She's got a lot of thoughts on this as that trial wraps up in New York and Robert De Niro shows up in an N95 mask. Hold on. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 3:36 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, James Lynch joins us from National Review. That's at 4 o'clock. Then at 5 o'clock, we talk to the Blaze's Chris Bedford. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I'm, of course, Vince Coglianese, alongside Corey Inganamort today, helping me out on the air. Corey, hello.
Hello, Vince. Thanks for having me.
And then we've got, let's see, Robert De Niro showed up outside that courthouse today in New York. You know, save the Biden campaign.
If Trump returns to the White House, you can kiss these freedoms goodbye that we all take for granted. And elections, forget about it. That's over. That's done. If he gets in, I can tell you right now, he will never leave. He will never leave. You know that. He will never leave.
Yep, because if there's one thing that's going to save a delusional old man, it's another delusional old man screaming at the rest of us. Joining us now to discuss, Mollie Hemingway. She's the editor-in-chief at the Federalist and a Fox News contributor as well. Mollie, great to talk to you today.
Great to be here with you both, Vince and Corey.
What an amazing turn of events. So we were promised a special guest this morning outside of the courthouse by the Biden campaign, and it was Robert De Niro. How excited were you to see Robert De Niro?
I mean, it was an interesting thing to see. The Biden campaign made a big production about how they were going to have a campaign event outside of the courthouse. And first off, that's already kind of a problem for the Biden campaign, because one of the reasons why Donald Trump is surprisingly strong in his support is that a lot of Americans like Trump. Some Americans love Trump, there is this other group of Americans who might not even like Trump, but they're so horrified by Democrat lawfare against their political opponents that they view that as a far bigger threat than, anything that they don't like about Trump. So the Biden campaign, has been making lawfare its chief strategy. They go out and do a campaign event. And then, as if that's not bad enough, it was absolutely insane if you saw it. I mean, Robert DiNero was ranting and raving. He seemed to have completely lost control of his ability to understand reality. He was getting heckled by the crowd. I mean, it was an absolute disaster. Whoever came up with this idea for the Biden campaign should be fired.
I mean, I already thought it was crazy that and I saw you tweeted about this past weekend, that Joe Biden later this week is apparently planning on gloating about the result of the trial, I guess expecting that Trump will be found guilty in this rigged scheme. And he's going to issue a statement from the White House. The press claims in order to emphasize that it's not political.
Yeah, I laughed when I saw that they were asking the press to say, could you say that when we do this speech from the White House that it's to not be political? It's like, well, it already has been completely political, but that kind of leaves no doubt as to the politics underlying all of this. People should be expecting a conviction. I mean, the whole point of a show trial, particularly one run as egregiously horribly as Judge Merchan has run this one. The whole point is to get a quick and easy conviction from a jury that's willing to do that. It's a possibility that someone will be strong enough to withstand the pressure, but I wouldn't count on it. But yeah, so Biden wants to gloat about how he's put his political opponent in prison like he's some tin pot dictator, and he thinks that will go well for him.
And Judge Merchan, one of the ways he's rigged this entire scheme is he told the attorneys, but this is particularly directed at Donald Trump's attorneys in that courtroom as they do their closing arguments, they're not allowed to discuss the law. He said, that's my job. I talk about the law. You don't talk about the law. I'm sorry, wait a second. These are lawyers. By definition, they're experts in the law. The whole reason they're there is to discuss the law and whether or not there was a violation of it or whether or not there's reasonable doubt that Donald Trump broke any such law. And here the judge, I have never seen such a thing, and I'm seeing attorneys left and right all saying, this is crazy. The judge is telling these attorneys they can't even discuss the law, Mollie.
Well, if you've ever served on a jury, you actually know judges frequently do play a big role in shepherding the jury through the process. Usually you have a judge, whether they're left wing or right wing, they usually care a little bit more about rule of law. This judge cares about getting a conviction. So he said that neither side could talk about the law, but actually he only constrained the defense from doing it. The prosecution just finished their final, comments. And when they did, they gave a false impression that a federal election violation had occurred in this case, that they gave a false impression that Cohen pleaded guilty for some crime that Trump committed. That's all false. So they were allowed to talk about the law, and the defense actually objected, and the judge overruled it. So it's just making a mockery of closing arguments, of jury instructions, and there's no doubt that eventually something like this probably would get overturned. But the whole point is so that during this campaign, we can meddle in this election by having a trumped up conviction based on completely ridiculous charges.
Hey, Mollie, Corey here. With Joe Biden set to potentially gloat about a guilty verdict in the next week or two, I'm curious of your thoughts. Obviously, the Trump campaign, the Trump team, and any fair-minded individuals would prefer a not guilty verdict or second best case scenario, a hung jury. Do you think there could actually benefit the Trump campaign if a guilty verdict is actually brought down on Donald Trump, just to demonstrate just how crazy this justice system is? Could it potentially help Donald Trump politically?
So I just want to say, first off, regardless of what happens here, it's just bad for the country to use courts to go after political opponents, and we have crossed a Rubicon that nobody should have ever wanted to have crossed. The short term, already the Democrats thought that these trials would just be an unalloyed win for Democrats. They're keeping their main opponent in a courtroom. They're costing him a lot of money. They're tarnishing him with these allegations that are ill-defined. And it hasn't worked well thus far. So they've been thinking, oh, maybe if he's convicted, then he'll lose support. And that's a possibility. It is also possible that people will hate even more the authoritarian nature of Democrats using courts to settle political disputes. But, if you see Donald Trump locked up, and this is the judge, they're already making provisions for what that would look like. How do you have a Secret Service detail in prison? I do think a lot of Americans would be horrified by it. So perhaps the best thing that could happen for Biden is to get out of this unscathed through some form of acquittal.
Yeah, I mean, look, you even have places like CNN saying that the prosecution failed to meet the burden of proof here. They're willing to say that on the air. You've got Fareed Zakaria saying if this were anybody else with any other last name, they wouldn't be charged here, and Donald Trump is being charged. You have Bill Maher pointing out that this is being brought in an election year on purpose. I think there's some broad realization across the legacy media that this is a rigged scheme. And the polling, Mollie, definitely demonstrates that people do think that Trump is unfairly being put upon by this left-wing attempt to misuse the court system. You kind of wonder what's the long-term impact on faith in the justice system at all in light of the way that the left has abused it.
And Vince, that's what actually concerns me. I mean, it's not good what's happening to Donald Trump. And in fact, it's really horrible that it would happen to anyone, including him. But what I'm more worried about is whether the Republic can long survive if we don't have rule of law. And you have, at this very same moment, you have all these people in corporate media trying to pretend like flying an appeal to heaven flag somehow delegitimizes the Supreme Court because one of the justices' wives flew it. And they're working really hard to delegitimize the Supreme Court, which is one of our few institutions that works. Meanwhile, they're supporting actual destruction of rule of law, which is basically the way we all hold together, is that we believe that we are ruled by laws and not men. And they are destroying that, like completely obliterating it in front of us, and nobody's really saying much about it.
Are you worried that as it becomes increasingly evident that Biden doesn't stand a chance to win this election with the voters? Because that's what all the polling demonstrates, and that's what led to that big Politico piece today that suggested that they're in full-on panic mode on the left right now about Joe Biden's election chances. Do you worry that these are exactly the conditions whereby the left becomes the most dangerous? I mean, you've written a whole book on all of the efforts to meddle in the last election. Do you think that they become increasingly dangerous going into this one?
I feel like the left feels they are willing to do literally anything to prevent Trump from winning election, and that is a very dangerous situation. The fact that they're nervous is actually possibly a good sign. And what I mean by that is that Democrats are nervous. If this were a free and fair election, we'd be headed to like a 1980 style blowout. We all know that the way we're doing elections now, it's less about what the public actually wants and more about who can traffic the most ballots into the ballot box. And Democrats are very good at that, and they've been very good at it for decades, with Republicans only recently realizing what a problem it is. But it might be that the situation is so bad that they realize that their ballot harvesting schemes won't be sufficient. You even saw in 2020 with everything they did, with all the censorship and the meddling and the lies and the deep state, they still only won by like 43,000 votes across 3 states. And that was with polling that actually did show Biden up quite a bit. Now you've got these polls showing Trump up, and so they might be very worried now.
I saw, that today, just before you came on, there was some breaking news that that in Ohio, Ohio has this ballot deadline. You've got to register. You have to have your candidate nominated before their ballot deadline, which would have come before the Democrat convention. The news today is that Democrats will now be having a virtual convention, meaning their real convention is going to be fake. I just want to be super clear about this. When they all assemble in August to, quote, nominate Biden, that it'll just be a show. It's going to be fake. It will have already been done weeks prior in order to make sure that Biden appears on the Ohio ballot. But that's a long way of me saying that they are sticking with Biden. As the year started, Mollie, I was not convinced that was going to be the case. Like, this guy's a loser, like, for them, a total loser. Are you surprised that he's the nominee?
They're sticking with him probably mostly because they just don't have another good option. you think about in 2020, one of the things that made Biden actually a really good candidate was that you could claim, with the help of propaganda press, that he was a very moderate person. Now, part of his problems electorally right now are that from day one, he's been fairly radical in what he's done, whether that's shutting down domestic energy production, flinging the border wide open and like completely destroying rule of law there, his censorship, all this stuff. But who are they going to put up that can like plausibly pretend to be moderate if it's not Biden? So they just don't really have many other good options.
And here we are. We're stuck with Joe. All right, Mollie Hemingway, I always appreciate your time and your thoughtful analysis of everything going on in our great country. Mollie, good to talk to you today, as always. All right, your call's coming in. We've got Joni in Clifton, Virginia, line 6. Joni, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi, Vince. Thanks so much for taking my call.
Yes,
I just
ma'am.
wanted to share my perspective today. As I heard Robert DiNero talking about the fear that Trump is never going to leave office, elections are over, your life is over if Trump becomes president again, I thought, wow, after seeing this case and Trump showing up day after day, week after week, playing by their rules, that if we didn't have this case, now we have tangible evidence Trump isn't going to be this crazy, wild dictator that they're spewing about. And this case has really put light on that, I think, in my perspective.
In other words, he's showing respect with each passing day for a system that definitely does not respect him. And
right, no matter how unfair it has been to him, he's been there day after day, playing by their rules. And when Robert DiNero comes and tells you something so far in left field and just spewing fear, which does get to people. We have a 93-year-old aunt who thinks the end of the world is going to happen, if Biden doesn't get elected again. It's because of this fear. But, on the other hand, this case has just shown that, day after day, Trump is following the rules.
Yeah, to further your point, Joni, Donald Trump has a gag order against him right now. He's been threatened. He may go to jail if he speaks of Matthew Colangelo, the number 3 in Joe Biden's Department of Justice, who's helping run this case. He hasn't mentioned his name since his gag order was put on him. He's following the law. So again, what Robert DiNero is saying, it's just completely falsehoods. But we already knew that would be the case. Robert DiNero, the person that independents and undecided voters are looking for guidance. I don't think so.
Yeah, meet the parents star, Robert DiNero. All right. Hey, thank you, Joni. Good, excellent point. Yeah, no, Trump's been, and in fact, even his election challenges in 2020, they were all in the court system. That's where he was doing it. They were filing all sorts of court challenges in order to audit the election to see, what happened and whether or not they could eke out a victory by virtue of a legal process. Without that, he'd left. He left on Inauguration Day. All right, let me see here. I've got Mark calling in from Woodbridge right now, line 3. Mark, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, thanks, Vince. Hey, great show as usual. Hey, Corey, your guest hosting, great show. Hope you had fun on your boat. But, hey, is this really a clown show? Robert DiNero he fired me up again saying, are people really this stupid that Trump will never leave the White House? Is this guy, but start going down his cabinet. Pete Buttigieg, Janet Yellen, Merrick Garland. These people, are they clowns too? Really, you can't only do it on Biden, but these clowns, Merrick Garland, Lloyd Austin, seriously. What's the other one? The Secretary of Education. Baccaria. I know it's not Baccaria, it's Sarah. Okay.
Well, a lot of people weren't hearing it from Robert DiNero either. Take a listen to the crowd as Robert DiNero was leaving his press conference today. They weren't having it.
You're nobody. You're moving stuff. You're trash. You're trash. You're done. You're done after this, my guy.
Yeah, Robert DiNero didn't like that very much. Coming up next, we got James Lynch from News. He's a news writer from National Review. We got Joe Biden meeting with Hunter Biden's ex. What were they talking about?